Hello everyone and welcome to this session. This morning's NBS CPD as part of Guerrilla Tactics 2021 is an introduction to the importance of specification as part of modern projects. Many aspects of specification are project specific, but there are some shared principles to apply generally, and we'll focus on NBS Chorus. And with the majority of attendees working in small to medium practice, we've tailored the content to focus on typically smaller works. My name's Paul, I'm Head of Technical Solutions at NBS. I'm an architect by background, and I work with architects and engineers, our customers, to help them use NBS platforms successfully in their practice. With me is Katie Fletcher, Quality Assurance Lead for our technical content, and formerly an NBS trainer for many years, from which I'm sure many of you will have met Katie before. Today's session is divided between us. I'll begin by introducing some of the key concepts of robust specification and how specification forms part of the golden thread, this continuous development of digital information focused around building safety. Then Katie will demonstrate some of the small works content in NBS Chorus and highlight some of the technical aspects of clauses, examples of how they can be edited and adapted, and include manufacturer information. I'll show you some of the other key functionality in NBS Chorus, like being able to collaborate and to publish your specification. And then there'll be time for a Q&A where you can ask us any questions about NBS or today's presentation. So I appreciate some of you may have lots of experience of NBS, some may be new to specification. So here's a quick introduction to who we are. NBS is a technology platform for the construction industry. We have thousands of users interacting with our platforms and services every day to create specification content, find products, and to develop digital models. NBS has built those platforms focused around excellent guidance, access to technical standards that helps you to reduce your risk, and really robust world-leading software. Through direct links to manufacturers, we also help connect you to product information. In the last year, NBS became part of the Big Factor Group, a Swedish headquartered building information group, giving us the scope and resources to invest in the future of NBS. They've also recently become the owners of Glenigan, if you're a user of those platforms too. NBS was first published almost 50 years ago in paper form, and everything since then has been a form of technological evolution, from the advent of office computing, web technologies, databases with links to standards, and now fully into the cloud with NBS Chorus over the past couple of years. But the core principle of standardized, reusable clauses of specification content that can be made project specific, they can be published, kept up to date, remains the same. Fundamentally, that's what we're trying to achieve. NBS created back in 1973 to fulfill a need to prevent architects from having to start their spec from scratch every time or to scribble all over an old spec that needed to be typed up. NBS gives you that template foundational content to develop something project specific. NBS also generate research and industry-wide reports, including the NBS National BIM report, which is now part of our Digital Construction Survey. Showing how organisations are really implementing emerging technologies, and you can find that on our website at thenbs.com. As a result of that research, some typical specification issues appear to be common across the industry. Feedback indicates that firstly there's a lack of quality in specifications, either because they're not clear enough or concise, they're reusing old specifications for similar projects. Time is a key issue for all project teams, and surveys suggest that most time is spent in model environments and drawn information, which doesn't leave enough time for the specification to develop over the course of the project, and instead it's either retrospective or it's left to the last minute. And often it's the most experienced staff that are put in charge because it can be perceived as a complex task. It's worth saying that it can be given to somebody with the right level of technical expertise, but equally it can be collaborative and should be checked and approved just like a drawing would be. Finally, it can be difficult for specifiers to define responsibilities for contributing information to the spec and to source information and the correct amount of data depending on the project stage and the procurement route. So to start, let's think about what we mean by this word specification. What is a specification? And more accurately, we should say, what is specification? Because it's a verb as much as a noun. You might produce a specification, as an issued document as part of the project information, but specifying is an evolving activity across the project. And most simply, specification can be described as making decisions, recording them digitally, and then communicating those decisions to the right people. So the first analogy I always use for describing specification in this way is going into a coffee shop and ordering yourself a drink, and further along the counter you either get exactly what you ordered or you can discuss changes to get what you want. In that case it's a verbal specification, whereas most of what we talk about is written and contractual, but that term specification is just being specific about what you want. Alternatively, think about making a sandwich. If you make and eat the sandwich yourself, you don't need a specification. For you, the specification is important. It's essential as soon as you need somebody else to do work for you. So what bread, what fillings from lots of choices, whether it should be cut in half, whether it should be wrapped or left open. That process of making decisions, recording them, and adding your specific requirements is specification. How do you specify what you want or what your client wants without somebody being able to read your mind? And finally, consider how you would buy a new device like a laptop or a mobile phone. You're very likely to want to compare features between different makes and models, and you'll have some key criteria in mind that the device has to match or exceed for it to meet your approval. And that's an important glimpse into the need for standardized properties, so battery life or screen resolution or weight in the case of those devices, but in construction terms all kinds of different properties to help you make fair comparisons, and that can be provided by manufacturers and listed in standard ways. Shopping websites use exactly these principles of standardizing data to make it easy for you to search for what you're looking for, filter what you want, and compare choices. For the built environment, the specification is most often a document, and you will be publishing that at some stage, but increasingly it's a data model or database made up of all kinds of links for a constructed entity, which could be a building but could also be a park or an art installation or a playground, and that's of suitable quality, meeting the client's requirements and the expected design intent. The project specification should ideally be developed in parallel with the rest of the design process and issued at key project stages, so that it's not just done retrospectively as part of the completed design, but that it forms part of the developing contractual information for the rest of the project. It's also worth noting what a specification doesn't include. The project specification is a written description of the works, and in most cases doesn't include graphical or geometric information, which is better represented in drawings and models, although there may be examples of where that's not true. And the definitions of quality and what the requirements are for the description of the works appears in the specification, whereas things like quantities, position, and assembly will appear in the drawn information. Often on small projects, certainly when I was in practice, this was the case, that drawings used to be annotated to a huge extent, almost as a replacement for the specification. But it's impossible the larger a project gets. And even on those small projects, it's really difficult to keep them updated as things change. Nor does the specification generally include information on quantities, repeated items like louvers or door hardware, and that's better expressed in schedules. And cost data is generally in the bill of quantities or pricing reports rather than the specification itself. There's also always changing factors that impact and accelerate the work that we do at NBS. New regulations and legislation, we respond to that to help you to build safer, and in this case about providing part of that golden thread of information. Sustainability goals, ensuring that we provide guidance on targets and requirements, whether they are global, like the Sustainable Development Goals, from industry, from society, carbon calculation, and reducing waste and water consumption. And digital transformation, that we've seen a workplace evolution. We're holding this session remotely. There's been a huge reduction in face-to-face travel. And we've seen that in terms of how Chorus has been adopted too. So long before people were moving away from desktop, working from home has been a major catalyst to beginning to collaborate more digitally. So why are specifications so important? Well, from the RIBA plan of work and the job book, there's a great piece in there about that it's really difficult to guarantee quality on a project, that a building's new users have no real way of establishing whether a newly built project has the potential to be of long-term poor quality, despite the building having met planning conditions, complied with all the regulations, secured building regs approval. How do we ensure a quality outcome? And it says that to survive intact, those requirements must be indelibly and clearly baked into the construction drawings and the specification. So that to ensure those quality outcomes, you have to really get them in from the earliest stage possible. I really like the guidance in the plan of work that the specification is where you capture the client's needs for the project's impact, its performance, the sustainability goals, its day-to-day functionality, so that all those things that make a building high quality have to be considered early. Build quality, on the other hand, is almost entirely reliant on post-tender stages, which is where clauses about installation, workmanship, testing, verification come in, along with commissioning and site inspection. Hinting towards the content of procurement stages, there's so much that the specification needs to consider: quality, the constraints, the materials, reference to technical standards, and so on. And there's examples of significant building failures in a range of private and public sector projects up and down the country that pop up in the news all the time. And those specifications are a vital piece of information in times of dispute, but fundamentally they're there to provide a complete written description of the works as part of a contractual suite. And now there's even more urgency around improving all kinds of aspects of the building industry as a result of the Grenfell Tower fire in 2017, when 72 people lost their lives. And that's brought a real renewed scrutiny and attention to performance and quality and specification. And from the Hackett report, Building a Safer Future, some extracts from that document that really began to focus on the need for this golden thread of information, that key information is recorded digitally and maintained for the life and use of a building through all of its phases. And that's now developed obviously into the Building Safety Bill, and the draft Building Safety Bill includes information around how the original design intent and any subsequent changes will be captured and preserved to support information for the future. Those who've been developing BIM processes are way ahead even of the Bill's requirements here, and the companies who can demonstrate best practice are asked to step up and work with government and industry to assist and train and improve the direction of travel. The recommendations have also influenced new NBS guidance on fire performance, demonstrating the way that NBS guidance evolves and is kept up to date in terms of what we do and the work that Katie and the team does on the technical side. And new guidance on handover documentation to encourage that golden thread of information and start to really consider the specification not as just a construction document, but as something that is going to evolve over the project timeline and is part of that handover information at project completion and beyond. So let's look at 10 ways that specifications are really important. The specification is your opportunity to document your client's requirements on a project. A good specification should be clear in terms of the level of quality, the products and materials that you want, and how they should be installed and tested. Just like our example of finding a new device earlier, the more specific you can be and the more informed choices you can make, the better the outcomes. Just as we mentioned about the drawings previously containing all kinds of notes, drawn information can't convey all of your requirements, even on the latest CAD platforms and BIM process, where fully rendered designs may contain lots of information within those individual objects. Only specification can capture the quality of materials, the workmanship that's required, and relevant standards that need to be met. And many aspects are never modelled, still like paint finishes, mortars, wall ties, temporary items. How do you indicate that concrete should have no cracking or paint strokes shouldn't be seen? Specifications tend not to include cost information, as I've mentioned, but if well composed and detailed enough, a contractor can price the job accurately. Expectations on minimum levels to be achieved in terms of performance will result in more accurate pricing down the line. And if you have local standards or testing that could impact cost, if you can include those in the specification, it really helps create a more accurate representation of what's required. Performance and quality can be cross-checked against the latest standards. So if you're not keeping specification up to date or coordinating your model information, it becomes harder to enforce and easier to challenge. Also, it's been tempting for organizations in the past to provide specifications full of general clauses from all kinds of previous projects, or even I've seen once the whole of NBS content as a kind of perceived safety net or catch-all. The NBS templates are designed to be adapted and edited and parked for the specific needs of your project, and Katie will demonstrate some of that. It makes no more sense to keep clauses in that you don't need than to send drawings of every detail you've ever designed. So if in doubt, leave it out. Improving statutory compliance in the spec can help you avoid penalties and legal implications on a project, and particularly around things like benchmarks and compliance with health and safety requirements, increasingly sustainability benchmarks. Adding the execution and verification and testing clauses will assist a project manager in determining that all of those requirements have been met. Again, the earlier you can embed these in, the better. In stating clearly the standards that you expect workmanship to be completed to, you're also effectively providing an on-site instruction manual that can be provided on-site as a reference guide. It's important to note that the specification itself shouldn't specify methods. The focus should be on the outcomes rather than the process by which they're achieved. So that cracking of concrete or paint without brushstrokes or tolerances need to be about what the end result should be, not how the contractor needs to get there. We've touched on how you're better protected from risk by creating a robust specification, but because specification forms part of the contract documentation and becomes legally binding in the event of any dispute or litigation, hard coding those specification requirements makes it harder to dispute and demonstrates that you were considering potential risks and issues ahead of time, clearly indicating your design decisions in writing. I hope you never do, but should you find yourself in the situation where there is a dispute on your project, if you have a specification to hand that's correct, clear, accurate, and demonstrates that you were considering those potential risks, you're in a much stronger position to discuss what you did. It tends to be far more detailed, but the spec is also an interpretation of the original client brief, and it should be straightforward enough to follow the requirements in the specification back to the original client brief and requirements. It serves as a written interpretation and ensures that you've fully understood the client's wishes and the outcome or asset that they require, as well as a key check on performance criteria. Specification will not stay static once you've written it. This idea that the specification will evolve across the project timeline to end up with an as-built version which accurately represents the final asset, but also that becomes invaluable for asset managers and FM teams to provide vital information about it as it transitions into reuse and even through to eventual demolition, presuming that that information is kept up to date with changes in the life cycle as part of that golden thread of information. Better specifications also reduce the need for questioning or meetings, often to clarify something that's not been made clear and needs to be checked or discussed in detail, all of which can add time and costs to a project. So the clear instructions and the minimal repetition you can provide in the specification allows the contractor to just proceed without disruption, and that will save time in the long term. So let me introduce Katie, who's now going to take us through some of the small works content in NBS Chorus. Over to you, Katie.
Hello. As Paul said, my name is Katie Fletcher and I have worked at the NBS for 17 years. The first 15 I was a trainer on all of the NBS products like NBS Building, Scheduler, Contract Administrator and Create, as well as Chorus. This portion of the presentation is intended to show some examples of sections from the new Small Works library of content for smaller projects, and it can be adapted for specification of all types of project, including new build, refurbishment, and retrofit projects. NBS started out as a master specification based around the common arrangement of work sections, or cores. Small Works is also cores based. The common arrangement groups of work sections are alphabetized and arranged approximately in construction order. The A group represents the preliminaries, B, complete buildings, structures and units. The C group all the way through to P represents the architecture content, with C being demolition, alteration and renovation. F is masonry. N, furniture and equipment. P, building, fabric, sundries, etc. The Q sections predominantly represent the landscape content. The groups of sections from R through to Y represent the services library of content, including V being electrical supply, power and lighting systems, and S for piped supply systems. Okay, now to have a look at my projects. I've already logged into Chorus, and within that are 10 projects, one being small works refurbishment. If I open that, I've got 3 specifications within this project. And I'm going to open up my Cause Small Works job. Now, I'm going to go through some of these sections to demonstrate some of the content that's within them, but also some of the things that you can do with them. Okay, I'm going to start with demolition, which is C20. If I open that one up, the list of my content for my whole job is on the left, so I can open up different sections immediately. I've got my editable window in the center, and on the right-hand side we've got the guidance, either general guidance, the important information relating to the sections as a whole, which include references to documents and other important information, as well as standards and regulations, and also the specific clause guidance aimed at the clause on its own. So let's have a look at this then. We've got content that's been edited and some of it's been parked. So just to point out the fact that one can, if you choose not to have something in your project, the easiest way to deal with that is just to park it, and it won't print. And then I've gone and edited a few of these items just to sort of show up as examples. So I've got things like extent of deconstruction, demolition, and I've added a suffix to this, which is to garage block. Further down, I've got another clause here, features to be retained, where I've added specific items for gates and gate pillars, external lighting, railings, and even the brutalist canopy over the entrance doors. Obviously, this block of flats in my mind is it's quite a detailed one. Location of the services, services disconnection arranged by contractor or employer. Things have been filled in some detail. And then if we keep going down, we've got services to be retained, general workmanship clauses, site hazards, adjoining properties, structures to be retained. There's useful clauses to do with asbestos. And then if I go all the way to the bottom, I've included, there's a clause in there on recycled materials. It's the same thing in each case. You click onto a clause to select it, and the guidance shows up in the right-hand window for that particular clause. Now, if I go back across to the left-hand side, the next section I'm going to open up is N11, domestic kitchen fittings, furnishings and equipment. And again, I wanted to show that it's possible to edit this as far down as you want. It's got a lot of common clauses within it, but all of them can be repeated, duplicated. They can be cut down by parking up individual items. You can add to them by adding new items to them, new lines. They can be amended to accommodate a suffix or a prefix. I've added a suffix to this one, are existing to be removed. So I've taken every clause item out of it apart from one, which is description. All existing kitchen units, doors and drawer fronts are to be removed and disposed of, or you could put kept to one side for reuse, etc. Keep going through. This second one is about installing a new kitchen, so fitted base units and wall units. In this particular case, I have chosen to use a manufacturer from our products section. So if I'm going to click onto that one, I see the linked guidance relating to, in this case, the Symphony Group kitchen unit, because that's the one I've brought in from products. This includes the address and contact information, the product reference, and all of the other standard generic items for that particular clause have been parked automatically. Of course, when one is doing a refurbishment job, one might be just replacing small parts. So in this case, we've got clauses for worktops, sinks, taps, traps and wastes. Just clicked on that one to show up the guidance for that one, giving suggested inserts for your clause items and the links externally to some standards. And then other clauses could be added in, as I said, if it doesn't cover everything that you need to. Next, I'm going to look at N13, sanitary appliances and fittings. And the reason I've picked this one is because if you're thinking about retrofitting, you might want to include the installation of things like the unisex accessible WC equipment packages, or DOC-M packages as they're known. And you might also be including inclusion of assisted access baths, etc. So all the other irrelevant items I've parked up. I also wanted to show that even a small item like a shower head can be specified as a single item in your project. So you've got the ability to just indicate that, and everything else has been parked up. We've also got a clause on installation generally, and then removing sanitary appliances and fittings. Also modifying sanitary installations. Okay, so there's other specific clauses on installing things like taps, wastes and overflows, hand dryers, whatever's needed. Next then, I'm going to have a look at M60, painting and clear finishing. And the reason I've picked this one as an example is because I've included where one might adapt a clause to accommodate contractor's choice, but this emulsion paint for all the internal walls and ceilings is going to be vinyl matte in Dove Grey. And then a bit further down, I included this gloss paint clause, and this one is another one where I've used the Hammerite in this case as a manufacturer from the manufacturer's area of Chorus. So I can click onto that one and see the details regarding Hammerite. In this case, I picked a gloss black, and then further down, I've then duplicated that clause, adapted it to say to entrance railings, and all I've done then is gone and changed the colour to dark green. Further down, I've parked up some more clauses, and then further down, I've left in clauses relating to handling and storage, surfaces not to be coated or cleaned but not coated, preparation generally, all useful things that can be again adapted to suit your job. So in every case, one can go through, park up the clauses you don't want, park up individual lines you don't want, add ones that you do, add your own clauses, amend titles, etc. to be specific. I think I've got one more I can show you. I think, oh yes, it's the Q section, and the reason I picked this one is that in this example, every single clause has been parked of the ones that come with Q50, because in my imaginary flat refurbishment, I've added a sculpture. So I've added a brand new clause called bespoke sculpture with the material and the finish and the size, the method of fixing being bolted to frame anchored to in situ concrete base. And then we've kept in clauses for the concrete foundations or setting components in concrete. Okay, so that's lots of examples of different sections. Any of them I could pick up and show you. In this particular case, it's K10 gypsum board dry linings and partitions for ceiling, lining on timber walls, battens to walls for in the description box, various standards, 13501-2 there, and then a bit further down, linings on timber to ceilings, wall lining system adhesive, installation on ceilings, dry lining generally, that kind of thing. I think I've covered most of the things that that you would need to be aware of. I haven't gone into too much detail about how one might do these things, because those are the kind of things that you would need to go on a training course for, to cover everything in all the detail. But I did want to just show a representation of all of the content that you might come across. Okay, before I come out of this altogether, I'm just going to go back to the overview on my project and instead open up the prelims sections in a separate specification. And just as it was in NBS Building or Scheduler, the project prelims are set out with A10 being project particulars, A11 being tender and contract documents, the site and existing buildings, etc. Just open project particulars, just as it is in editing the work sections, the main work sections. The prelim sections are set out with our sections on the left-hand side, the editable window in the center, and when I click onto a clause, I'm given the guidance for the individual clauses with details that one might need as one is editing it. And again, you can add your own clauses, repeat clauses, amend clauses, add your own lines, change the titles, add suffixes and prefixes, etc. So hopefully that's given you a really good overview of the kind of thing one might expect to see. I did want to say, though, that we see this as a starting point with all of this content relating to refurbishment, retrofitting, etc. I know that some of that has been introduced where it wasn't previously in minor works, and we'll be continuing to develop our authored content across all the libraries by investigating the extensive and very current subject of refurbishment, conservation, retrofitting, etc., as well as the increasingly critical and important topic of sustainability and responsible specification of materials, etc. And with that, I'll hand back to Paul, who will continue on with the presentation.
Thanks so much, Katie. So in a moment, I'm going to take you through some of the core functionality in Chorus as well. But it's worth mentioning that NBS have been doing this same work of standardizing the specification process and providing technical information for half a century. And in 2023, we'll be celebrating 50 years since that first publication. And every day since then has demonstrated a desire to innovate and to improve and make the industry better. 1/3 of projects end in dispute, and 1/4 of those are linked to poor specification. There's more than 8,000 changes every year to construction standards and almost 100,000 references in NBS. So if you're trying to manage that process by yourself in practice, in standard specs in Word or Excel, sharing these documents by email, do consider NBS, because it will make you more efficient and is going to reduce risk, not just to have an impact on your practice, but improving the wider construction industry. So with all of the things that are on screen there, some real value in using NBS, whether it's consistent structure, access to those technical references, and being able to capture your own knowledge, improve teamwork, and ensure that you can produce those publications and regular issued documents. Digital transformation demonstrates that we are capable of massive change, and now that NBS Chorus is cloud-based, there's nothing to download to a PC, there's nothing to install. Perhaps you're having to pay IT teams to install software in your practice, and it's accessible anywhere, so you're no longer tied to a desktop to specify in a corner of your office to use NBS. And because you have access anywhere, we're seeing organizations taking tablets and iPads onto site to specify as meetings happen. Okay, so let's take a look at some of that key functionality in the core version of NBS Chorus. Hopefully from Katie's demonstration, you've been able to see that the content and the functionality in NBS Chorus is not just for large practices or just for new build projects, but can be used across a range of projects and for all kinds of practice size. So here I've got a very small project, couple of specifications within here. And the first thing to mention is that you can have as many specifications as you need for that project. So if you were splitting this up by trades, by work packages, whether you want to split the preliminaries from the external specification and divide that up into different disciplines, whatever it might be, you've got the ability to control that. Not only that, but depending on your level of core subscription, you can invite team members to be part of the project. So you currently, as the creator of a project, have control over who has access to that information, and then you can begin to invite members of your team to be part of that project and define the role that they have. Administrators have the ability to add and remove users, to have control over the project like you would. A contributor can edit the specification content, and whereas readers only have the ability to view the content without being able to edit it. So you could define that role for a particular individual that you're inviting from your organization. But then you can do that at a specification level. So you've got the ability to say, I just want this person to be able to read the preliminaries, to edit the external envelope specification, but not to have any visibility of a different part of the specification. And you can control those permissions for each user. You can also send a message, perhaps explaining why you want them to be part of the project, and then send the invitation. That user will then receive an email to this email address, and also will receive a notification in the Chorus platform if they're already an existing user. If they're not, they'll receive an invitation to sign up for an NBS ID. As Katie has demonstrated, it's really important to realize that you can edit the content of the specification and really begin to adapt clauses to your own needs. So where there are requirements that you may have, there will be drop-downs for many of the clauses available, helping you to make those choices, and guidance on the right-hand side to help you with those. But if you did have additional requirements, you can always insert your own information and start editing the clauses to your own requirements. And it's that ability to add, edit and part content within NBS Chorus that is so powerful. If you had made a mistake within this clause and wanted to discard your changes, you can. Alternatively, you can save them, and then they are pushed to the cloud. And that means that you're not having to keep backups and worry about the information within the spec. It's all saved in the cloud for you to access. Clearly, with the ability to collaborate and work on these projects within the cloud and within the NBS Chorus platform, you may be sharing information digitally, but at some point you're going to want to publish the specification, probably to PDF, perhaps to an external document. So you have the ability to do that just by clicking on this three-dot menu here, and you can click Publish Specification. And it's there that you've got the ability to choose between PDF for the course content or export to Word. And that way, if you do have additional formatting requirements, you've got the ability to export to Word and even to add tables and schedules and other attachments to that document as required. By default, our PDF uses an NBS template to publish a really robust, well-structured specification. There are multiple features available in terms of the level of subscription that you have, but one of those is the ability to save this to a publish history and to keep the changes that you're making as an audit trail across your documentation. So you can choose, if you were just using this as an internal draft, not to save to the publish history, or to save it to an audit trail and give it, numbers and statuses and revisions and so on, so that you've got the ability to do that. And then you can choose to give it a file name in line with your own Office requirements for naming conventions. By default, you get the NBS default style sheet, but depending on your level of permissions and subscription, you can change these style sheets and add your own to NBS Chorus, but that is a Chorus Pro feature. And just like downloading a PDF from a browser, you'll get the PDF in your downloads folder wherever that appears, and you can see here that there's a really well structured specification with your project information on the front, the description of the project, and then we've only got a couple of sections in here at the moment, but they're hyperlinked, which allows you to jump straight to the section that you're wanting to look at, and anywhere that you've got references and information to websites, those will be hyperlinked as well. If you are using NBS Chorus, you've got the ability to see support information. So there's a whole host of support articles available, and the ability to take e-learning modules as well. If you encounter any problems, you can get in contact with our support teams and even suggest features that you'd like to see in the product. And if you're wanting to see what's new in NBS Chorus, you can just click this link here, and and that'll take you to our forums, where on the support pages we're constantly updating the information that's available. So for example, here you can see that there's been a technical update to the UK course content sets, and a download available to see exactly what those changes are and what the summary has been and what the technical changes are to those sections. The last thing I wanted to point out was a couple of great resources available on our website. So if you want to go to the NBS.com and look at the resources page, there you can find knowledge articles on a number of different subjects. And one in particular is that we've recently produced this article on construction specifications, which picks up on a lot of the aspects of the presentation so far, with some really good links to other documentation too, and great articles on subjects like classification. And also case studies from our customers who have been using NBS Chorus successfully. And one of those, J. Foster Architects, is a small practice using the NBS Chorus small works content. So worthwhile realizing that they're not all giant engineering companies that are using NBS Chorus, but that there are examples of how people are using NBS Chorus small works. And that includes integration with model information, so in this case using Revit to scan across the model and make associations between the model and the spec, even on small projects, and annotating details so that there are really clear references that can be kept up to date with the specification information. Also on the NBS.com you'll see our support area is available, which is where you can find NBS Academy, the name for all of the training courses and information that we provide to help you learn more about our platforms like NBS Chorus, and that's where you can sign up for training courses which can also be delivered online, and there you can see information about all of the various courses that are available from our team. And because we're part of the RIBA CPD Providers Network, those sessions are worth double CPD points as well. As you begin to learn more about NBS Chorus, one of those courses might be suitable for your team. There are multiple other features available within the NBS Chorus platform, but some of those are Chorus Pro features. For example, being able to create masters where you have content that can be reused from project to project, the ability to add specification notes that allow you to add information to clauses alongside the content to provide information and create conversations between your team members, are Chorus Pro features. We'd love you all to start using NBS Chorus and NBS Source, and we hope that you found today's session useful. If you'd like to talk to somebody about accessing NBS, please do call or email us. Thanks so much.